Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. Before I introduce our next episode of the Authority File, I want to remind our listeners that we have a brand new podcast on the way. It's called Patron Driven, and it's a narrative-style podcast that brings you crowdsourced library stories where the personal meets the professional. Season 1 is a 5-part series that follows 4 librarians through the destruction of the Lone Star College Kingwood Library after Hurricane Harvey and the 2 years it took to rebuild. It's a really incredible story and features writing and producing from the whole podcast team here at Choice, including Mark Dirks, Sabrina Kofer, and myself. I hope you'll tune in. Patron Driven debuts in late June wherever you get your podcasts. You can visit our website, choice360.org, and click on the librarianship drop-down to sign up for email updates about Patron Driven. While you're there, you'll find behind-the-scenes bonus content for the new program, and you can check out the new trailer for the upcoming series. Okay, so in the meantime, in the next episode of this podcast, we're going to be talking about how librarians can support critical thinking in an era of misinformation and fake news. If you're thinking information literacy, you'd be correct, but this is not your traditional approach to InfoLit. My guests have all built their own programming and instruction that is specifically aimed at combating today's fire hose of alternative facts, faulty research, and the digital technologies that enable them. We'll discuss their specific approaches, how they constructed their workshops and lessons, and how the traditional approach to InfoLit instruction may be changing for good. My guests are Sarah Morris, Head of Instruction and Engagement at Emory University Libraries, Dan Chibnall, STEM Librarian and Assistant Professor of Librarianship at Drake University, Roz Tedford, Director for Research and Instruction at Wake Forest University, and Mila Steele, Senior Publisher, Social Sciences at Sage Publishing. This series is brought to you by Sage Publishing. In this final episode of our 4-part series, my guests talk about how they measure the success of their instruction and how, in an ideal world, InfoLit can be scaled up to an institutional level. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of discussion around, kind of looking ahead and what's next, and particularly I do want to touch a little bit on sort of measuring success in sort of the assessment that you go through for this kind of instruction. And Roz, I'm wondering, how do you measure success, particularly with something that you're asking, students to continue practicing long after they've left school?
Yeah, that's a super good question, but it's also a super hard one to answer for this sort of thing because, we don't, unless they become my Facebook friend later and I see them only posting like really awesome things and, whatever, there's no real way to know it. But I do think you can, like we have been able, and one of the sort of luxuries of being able to teach this 3-credit class for an entire semester, even though the last half of it, we're not actually seeing them twice a week the way we were, is that we're really starting to see in their responses to the things we're having them read now online and the assignments that they're doing, we're really starting to see them sort of synthesize all this information. And so often now, completely unprompted by us, in their responses to things, they'll be like, that is totally the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, or that is totally right. The illusion of explanatory depth. Thank you, Dan, for turning me on to that particular one at Charleston, because we talked in depth about that. But that's totally this. That is, and I really see that they're trying to get outside of their comfort zone and following additional news and adding new apps. And they've been forwarding us emails and be like, oh my God, have you seen this crazy story about this, that, or the other? And so we've been able to see that sort of over the course of this semester develop really beautifully. My co-instructor and I are, texting each other all the time, with like little screenshots of their work, and we're like, we're so proud. They're, they seem to be doing it. But, part of, I think, our success was we walked in there on the first day, and we were like, we are all in this together. It's not like Hugh and I, your instructors, are perfect at this, right? I am just as likely now as I was probably a year ago to reply completely based on a headline headline, even though I know I should never do that, right? Like you get outraged at this headline, even though in the back of your mind you're going, I bet that headline is not actually what the story is about. So sort of
Yeah.
making it's a journey we're all going on, and we all continue to go on this journey, and we all are going to learn new things, and all we can do is try and get better and better. And and so we've tried to make it more rather than us, imparting some great wisdom on them about it, talking about how this is something as a society we all have to get better at and we all have to work through.
Hmm. Um, I'm wondering also if we often think about the sort of the way libraries are proving value, quote unquote, up into the institution, and I'm wondering, are there ways that each of you have been doing this, or is there more we can be doing at the institutional level in terms of scaling the programming that you're doing, or um, you know, sort of making administration aware of this, or what even if there's not anything currently being practiced. I mean, in an ideal world, what might that look like?
One of the things that my class kind of spread by word of mouth. So, after I started teaching it, I just kept getting more and more phone calls or emails from other faculty who were really interested in, how does your course apply to my discipline, right? And so I've been invited in to classes to like talk about misinformation and some of these other concepts as it might apply to what they're talking about in class that day. And so I think that that can sort of showcase librarians as sort of being these multidisciplinary people that have these critical thinking skills to showcase. And also like at Drake we have this institution called the Ray Society, and the Ray Society does a lot of adult learning classes for people in the community. We're very proud of it, and I was almost immediately approached to do my class as like a one shot, like a long one shot for these adult learners. And I've done it now a couple of times, and it's always just packed to the gills with people from the community who just want to know as much as possible about fake news. And, they have all these sort of worrisome questions. And it's really interesting because some of the questions they ask are exactly the same ones my students ask. And then some of the questions they ask are completely different. So I feel like those are a couple of ways that we can kind of say, hey, librarians, we have our toes in a lot of different bodies of water. We know how this stuff works. Give us a chance, and we can sort of spread the word
Yeah.
in different places.
Hmm. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree with Dan. It's just important, spreading through word of mouth and kind of getting the word out there about what we can contribute to this conversation and how we can help. It's definitely been sort of a concerted effort and deliberate push at my library to kind of put this out there and connect it to broader conversations happening on campus. I feel like every individual conversation I might have with a faculty member or a student, people are deeply interested in this topic. I mean, they want to learn more, they have concerns about it. And so just really finding ways to connect that to broader conversations going on and help people recognize, the value libraries and librarians can bring to this, and how we can really equip and empower students with really vital skills. I think in an ideal world, information literacy and media literacy would just be part of everyone's core curriculum and like completely embedded and written out everywhere. But as I think just thinking about how that really can be central and vital and super important for students at your institution, and just finding different ways to highlight the work we're doing, to highlight the value that comes with that, and just finding those different partnerships in the community and on campus to sort of push that forward and just reach more and more people.
Roz, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've been thinking about, and this is sort of a larger institutional question, and in some ways it's moot now because none of us know what the financial implications of all of this is going to be on higher ed institutions. But I do think there's ways for the library to sort of advocate for sort of institutional level support. So we're looking at something like, so this year our School of Business had been subscribing for all of its majors and faculty and graduate students, the Wall Street Journal Online, and they agreed to foot the bill for most of the rest of it so that we could get it for the entire campus. So library threw in a very small amount, our student government threw in a very small amount, and the School of Business covered the rest of it. And so now we're able to go to our students, and on day one we had them download the Wall Street Journal app, and we had them create their account and all of that sort of thing. But that's not the only sort of resource out there. That it would be amazing if libraries had the money, right, to be able to purchase. So, like, I was one of the early sort of reviewers of the SAGE course, the critical thinking course that Mila was talking about. And there are other things out there, and SAGE has got some amazing databases, but as do other vendors as well that that might be useful. But it's the kind of thing like, what do you cut in your library budget when what you're purchasing is not necessarily something that's like a discipline specific content, right? So it's a tricky sort of calculus to figure out. But in these days of, we don't know where the money's going to be coming from in the next probably 18 to 24 months, it's going to be a harder thing. I do, like, next week I've just been in emails today about doing sort of an online sort of Zoom thing with some of the universities, some of our donors, right? So they're just a group of donors. They're just trying to keep them engaged and whatever. And they were like, they said they'd really love to hear about this fake news stuff. And I'm like, put me on Zoom. I'll talk to them about it. So maybe there's some connections to be made there to maybe some people who do actually, still have money that could be funding some of these resources at more an institutional level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. And then finally, I just want to ask, what is it like for libraries and publishers too, actually, to address these issues with such speed? You know, there seems to be every day something new that crops up, another hole in the dam to plug up or whatever. And especially given the acceleration and urgency of the current COVID-19 crisis, as well as how imminent September is feeling for all of us. I'm wondering if you could sort of generally characterize kind of your feelings around all of this, and Sarah, we can start with you on that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've been responding to everything in sort of rapid crisis mode for the past few weeks. I joked with someone I got sort of a year's worth of goals done in like 72 hours, and we were trying to shift everything over. It was kind of frantic. Yeah. But no, I think, even in the class I did back in the fall, I was upfront with students about how everything is evolving so rapidly here, and that we're kind of all sort of co-learning here together and experimenting and just trying to roll with things. And I try to, I do, teacher training with librarians and faculty and things, and kind of just being upfront about sort of acknowledging the speed and rapid pace of all of this and how overwhelming it can feel sometimes. And so just trying to sort of be flexible. I think just respond to things where you can. I feel like at some point I just had to recognize, okay, I'm not going to hit every single thing. There's just too much going on out there, but I find strategic partnerships or, someone else to sort of help kind of cover some of the stuff. I think at the end of the day, again, I feel really strongly that libraries and librarians are really central to this conversation and have a lot of contributions to make. So, I just tell my colleagues, like, anything you can do to get out there and work with others and help others sift through this, because we're all grappling with so much right now, is really beneficial and valuable. But yeah, it's rapid fire and exhausting a lot of days, and definitely challenging to keep up with everything.
Right. So Roz, how about you? How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, so I sort of have sort of bifurcated, right, attendance. But I mean, I was in the middle of teaching this class, so I'm one of the librarians who suddenly had to up right at spring break and convert everything for the rest of the semester online. And for the first sort of 2.5 weeks of that, like, I felt like I was doing nothing but that, and then participating in the leadership meetings of the library, because I'm the director of my unit. And so between the two of those, like, you almost didn't even have time to breathe. And now things are like, next week is our last week of classes, and we're working on getting our content up for that. And now suddenly we start to think about, like, what can we learn from this? How can we incorporate this? Like in our class, we've decided that their final reflection is going to be about mis and disinformation around the coronavirus, because there's been so much
Yeah.
of it. So we're going to sort of have them draw those parallels, right? There's no better sort of living, right, example of everything that's been swirling around. And so we'll structure that a little bit. I'm assuming we haven't actually written the final assignment yet. We will this week. And so we're doing that. But then you also sort of, as a library, right, administrator, then you're sort of looking at how much were we able to continue to offer these services online. And the fact of the matter is, my group was fairly, like, we're monitoring chat and we're answering emails, and we're rolling through that with faculty and helping them find the resources, and vendors. I mean, Sage and so many other vendors have been so amazing about sort of cracking open their libraries and their content, to help make that easier in this sort of rapid transition. But we also know that that's not all going to last. And if, God forbid, I can't even think about being online for the fall, but if that happens, then there's whole other conversations that are going to have to get made. So I'm feeling a little bit like, I have been drinking out of a fire hose for 2.5 weeks, and someone maybe has, like, cranked it down 50%, right? It's not off, right? It's not like just dripping, but maybe it's not quite as much like in your face as it was, 2 weeks ago, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, from a instructional standpoint, my spring course that I teach every spring is one I designed a few years ago called Communicating Science, Bringing Scientific Information Literacy to the Public. And so we were actually, following coronavirus and COVID when the semester began in early February, before all of this really exploded. And now that I'm online with the course and teaching online and working from home, I always tell the students, I'm not going to overwhelm you with this because we're all living it, but we still need to talk about it, so in our discussion boards and when I do, biweekly videos and stuff like that. So this has been a conversation topic for us all semester, and it continues to be, especially the misinformation surrounding COVID and coronavirus. Um, and as for our library, we're developing virtual library resources and services for this summer and this fall, just to be prepared. And I know, like, recently there was some joking around on, like, library Twitter about, oh, librarians are going to create research guides around COVID, and people are like, ha ha ha, librarians. And it's like, yeah, but we kind of do need a research guide and, like, we built one at Drake because we simply just wanted to put up, here are some good sources of information to read about COVID, right? So, like,
Right.
Nature News, good publications. And so we put that up there, and people were really happy that we put it up there, and we got a lot of good feedback. And I'll just say finally, too, that I still to this day, even this semester, get emails from former students that were in my fake news class. And they tell me, Mr. Chibnall, I saw a cognitive bias the other day on the news, or, oh, I recognized a logical fallacy, And I just think to myself, they still know how to swing. They still know how to hit those pitches. So I'm
Right.
really glad that they do that. Yeah.
Yep. Job well done. And then Mila, finally, on the publisher side, what are the feelings there, and how are you guys kind of reacting to everything that's going on these days?
Well, as an industry, publishing isn't known for being a swift current, so
True.
it was quite a revolutionary feeling for us to feel like just drop everything and sort of, what's our supply chain? How can we help? How can we support in terms of getting stuff out there? And it's complicated. Even at the best of times. And, as Ross was saying, for us, it was, instant decision to say, well, we open up the chest and we just want to be here to support getting students to the finish line this year, and to support
Hmm.
research, and to be a partner in that. And then September is looking like a September unlike any other September,
Any
potentially.
other?
And just really having as many kind of constructive conversations as we can, and just keeping our ear really close to the ground in thinking about how learning is going to change, and how access to information, access to learning and teaching resources is going to move and shift, and where instructors will need to be finding material that they can deliver to students in new ways. And we're just kind of watching very closely to see how things that people have done in an emergency then become new and hopefully better ways of reaching students and putting the library at the center of that as well.
Yeah, is there anything specific that's early indications cropping up either in those discussions or in practice that look promising for the fall and beyond?
Well, I think people are realizing how challenging and difficult it is. And so from the publisher perspective, we're good at that stuff, and we really hope that this becomes an opportunity for us as well. It's difficult to make interactive content. It's difficult to make good video. It's difficult to convene students and bring them together in kind of synchronous seminar, good online learning in that way. So I think we're, but certainly looking at sort of more resources that will need to be made available through learning management systems that can be delivered flexibly in a way that I was talking about earlier as well. And that kind of flexible delivery and access is only going to become more important.
Excellent. Okay, well, Sarah Morris, Dan Chibnall, Rosalind Tedford, and Mila Steele, thank you so much for joining us on the program. That was an excellent conversation.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. You just heard from Sarah Morris, Head of Instruction and Engagement at Emory University Libraries, Dan Chibnall, STEM Librarian and Assistant Professor of Librarianship at Drake University, Roz Tedford, Director for Research and Instruction at Wake Forest University, and Mila Steele, Senior Publisher, Social Sciences at Sage Publishing. This series is brought to you by Sage Publishing. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media specialist, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.